Hello everyone, my name is Dimitri Sane, or you may call me as Mr. Insane. Pixar Animation Studios has always made the best animated films of all time. From Toy Story, to Finding Nemo, to WALL-E. They have created a legacy for making such astounding stories with top-notch animation and giving such memorable characters from all of their movies. Even though in the first entries, Pixar was at the top of the game. Nowadays, they're almost in the same subpar with the Disney Animation Studios movies. If not, they're doing it better. Pixar has went into a dark path of making such mediocre movies. I mean, at times they can do such great ones that are the same level of the original Pixar classics, but there are other times they can do such decently okay movies. But I still respect them for making such memorable animated films that I always enjoy watching them every now and then. I was originally going to plan on reviewing all of the Pixar movies in order by starting with Toy Story. But given the fact that the upcoming Pixar movie is actually a sequel to one of their movies, I decided to dedicate on reviewing that movie specifically, as well as giving the idea on how it's going to connect with this upcoming sequel. So, with all that said, let's go into review The Incredibles. The story revolves around this family of superheroes, the Pars, who live in a normal life and hide their powers from the civilians. But when the man of the house, Bob Parr, who's also known as Mr. Incredible in his glory days, gets contacted by this mystery organization who turns out to be a villain named Syndrome that's plotting on topping all the superheroes with his killer robot. So the family has to gather together to stop this villain and save the world. This movie is amazing. And what's even more intriguing is that this was not originated by the Pixar crew, but it was an idea of director Brad Bird before he went to Pixar. It was originally intended to be done by Warner Brothers and being hand-drawn animated, but when they denied that, he went to Pixar and transitioned all of his designs to 3D models, which worked perfectly. Brad Bird is one of my favorite animation film directors, definitely in my top 10 list. And this movie is no exception for being part of his fascinating works that shows all of his signature and his style. The story is quite incredible. Well, no pun intended. But like I was saying, not only this movie explores and portrays the suburban life of this family of superheroes quite nicely, but it also shows a lot of themes and topics that are quite mature and relatable for many people, especially for adults. This includes midlife crisis, marriage discussions, and even dealing with the government in the first act of the film. The animation is so unique. It really was quite impressive, especially at the time being that for how the characters look, because again it shows a lot of the designs that Brad Bird is mostly known for the shapes and sizes for each character. But what's more interesting is that it was one of the first films that uses a lot of realistic details on the characters, like how their hair moves, like for how they get wet, and how the details on the eyes and their expressions. It really was impressive. The voice acting is amazing. From Craig T. Nelson to Holly Hunter to Jason Lee to Samuel L. Jackson, of course. He's really cool. No pun intended. I know he's playing the character of Frozen. Frozone! Now this movie's villain, Syndrome, is definitely one of Pixar's best antagonists. Not to mention for being the best antagonist that was directed by Brad Bird. Not that his villains are terrible, in fact, most of them are actually hilarious, but they're just only threats and nothing interesting about them. Syndrome stands out of them because he has a history and path that is quite intriguing. He goes from a quirky fanboy that wants to help out superheroes to a smartly psychotic superhero wannabe that will take out all of the superheroes to stand out for being the best. It does feel quite chilling when Mr. Incredible discovers Syndrome's plans and even all of the superheroes that he killed off. You can see on his expression that he feels guilty about this because he was the one who denied Syndrome as a partner, and because of this he went into this dark path of this not superpowered character creating such advanced technology that terminated most of these superpowered heroes. In a way, Mr. Incredible does felt intimidated by Syndrome because all these people that he knew and for what they went through. I remember when I watched this film when I was young. I was like 13 years old, and when I saw the dark and gritty moments of this film, I just only went, wow, damn. This is definitely one of those movies that cares so much for telling a straight story that goes all sorts of emotions, including drama and even suspense, and not so much of being a comedy routine every time. I mean, there's still some great humor, which the jokes still hold up. They're really hilarious. But what I'm saying is that nowadays in animated features, the comedy is always the main focus, which not so much with this film as it blends very well with all the genres, with comedy, action, drama, suspense, and yeah, it's mostly it, I think. Definitely my favorite character of this movie is Edna Mode. Every time when I see this movie, I smile when this character is on screen. She's eccentric, hilarious, energetic for giving out these superheroes in their badass costumes. Not to mention such memorable quotes like, "But this is a hobo suit, darling. Oh, you can't be seeing this. I won't allow it. 50 years ago, maybe, but now, What are you talking about? You are Elastigirl! My God! Put yourself together! It can also withstand a temperature of 1,000 degrees. Completely bulletproof and machine washable, darling. That's a new feature." No games! Yep, basically like that. It is really quite fascinating that the movie's director, Brad Bird, is the voice of this character. The action sequences are so creative. Again, showcasing all of the family's personalities and that when they fight the villains, like showing the strong force of Mr. Incredible, the flexibility of Elastigirl. Even Violet and Dash give out such great action scenes. Who doesn't love the iconic scene where combining the force field and the super speed at the exact same time? When it comes to my favorite scene, strangely enough, my favorite scene is the part where the family are having dinner. This scene showcases all of their personalities from each member of the family, and not to mention the dialogue and conversations are so believable. They feel like a real family. They even giving out ideas on what they think of their superpowers. Not to mention that they even showcase them in such a hilarious manner. Now let me talk about the music for a while, since this is one of the first scores that was composed by Michael Giacchino. And this is still my first soundtrack of his works. Not only this movie went on to make his career even bigger and went on to compose many themes from other movies that still have some of my favorite soundtracks. He's considering to be the new John Williams for this generation, and went on to collaborate with more Pixar movies and even with directors like J.J. Abrams and of course, Brad Bird. The music has some style of jazz that fits very well for the movie's environment, and even some reminiscent to the James Bond music. I did read that John Barry, who's well known for doing the scores of the early James Bond movies, was one of the first choices of this film for the score. And if you actually hear Michael Giacchino's soundtrack and John Barry's early James Bond music, they do sound similar. And what's even more is that if you actually compare the first track of this soundtrack as well with the opening of the James Bond movie titled On Her Majesty's Secret Service, some of the tunes and notes are very recognizable from one to the other. In conclusion, and I'm going for pun intended, this movie is incredible! The story is powerful and heartwarming, the characters are enjoyable and relatable, the animation still holds up, the music is just badass, and of course it is considered to be the best Fantastic Four movie for many people before we get the release of the lackluster Fantastic Four movies. Fun fact trivia to my family members is that I remember that when this movie was released for the first time, it would later be the next day where one of my cousins would later be born. So, needless to say, it was an amazing weekend for the time of November 2004. So if you haven't seen this movie, go watch it. And if you have seen it, just repeat it again, because it is definitely one of the best Pixar movies, one of the best superhero movies, one of the best animated films, and it's still my favorite movie that was directed by Brad Bird. And I am thankful that he wrote and directed the upcoming sequel that it finally deserved. That is all I have to say for today, and I'll see you into the next review. See you later. You know, it's kinda funny how he mentions that the music sounds like a James Bond movie, even though I have met a James Bond at the Oscars. Kinda irony, darling.